ऑनलाइन भी कर रहे हैं क्या? ओके ठीक है ठीक है। Okay, so before starting the lecture, first tell me what has been your background in graduation. How many students are from science background? Others are from humanities or commerce? Humanities. So have you studied history before in school? Seriously, everybody has studied already history in schools, but what about your understanding of history? Do you have a basic idea of the subject? हाँ कि ना, enthusiasm है नहीं उतना. Okay, so I am assuming that most of you do not have very good idea of history. Have you studied about the exam UPSC syllabus? Are you well versed with the syllabus? Okay, so if we talk about history specifically, what are the areas that are being asked in prelims and in mains? Ancient, medieval, art and culture, then modern, world history, post-independence. These are the 6 areas that we have to study. First, we will do a basic introduction, then we will start with our first topic. So, if I have to divide it broadly, what we can say? Ancient, medieval, third would be art and culture. Because why art? I am writing art and culture here because mostly when art and culture is asked, it is asked with respect to ancient and medieval. Okay. So art and culture. Then the fourth area would be modern, world history, then post independence. See, before studying for the exam, you should know what are the important areas at which stage. So, there is prelims, there is mains, and then there is interview. Interview is the later stage. First, if we talk about prelims and mains. So, in prelims, these three and modern, these areas are asked. When we come to mains, there you will also be asked world and post independence. But what is different there? Typical political ancient and medieval history will not be asked. There your syllabus is art and culture. Okay, so here what will happen? These two areas will be removed. What in ancient and medieval? Political history, economic history. Okay, otherwise when we study history, we do study cultural history. So cultural history is going to be asked when we are talking about mains. Okay, that is going to be the syllabus for the exam at both the stages. Now, when we are looking at the exam, have you looked at this year's question paper prelims? How was it? Difficult? So, see, it was difficult, that is one thing, but apart from that, if you look at other question papers from 2022 or 21 or 20, you will realize that the trend is changing. Earlier, what used to happen? These areas were being ignored. If you have studied modern, you will be able to get good marks in history. Okay, now what has happened? There were around 14 questions and only 3 questions were asked from modern. So earlier there was this perception that even if you leave ancient and medieval out, you will be able to qualify. Now this is something that has changed. So now you have to focus properly upon ancient as well as medieval. Okay, this is something that you need to keep in mind. Again, see, when we go into the nitty gritties of the question papers, you'll realize again there are certain areas from where questions are being asked constantly. For example, Buddhism. If you go to Paleolithic or Mesolithic or Neolithic, these are not that important areas now. These used to be important in 90s. Now the trend is completely different. So what is important to understand before starting your preparation is the syllabus and then PYQs. Then you should also understand which are the areas which are being asked. For example, now the trend has shifted to ancient and medieval. Okay, so these are important areas. Now when we study ancient or when we study medieval, not all the topics are important. Some topics are important from prelims perspective, some topics are important from mains perspective. How do we understand which topics are important? By looking at previous year question papers. Okay, that is the key. So the first thing that you should do as a UPSC aspirant is go through at least 6 years question papers so that you understand what are the areas which are important. And first, when you have identified those, again, see, Sangam is there, which is constantly being asked. Buddhism is there, which is constantly being asked. Again, number of questions differ. If you look at Sangam age, there will be 1 or 2 questions. If you look at Buddhism and Jainism, there are going to be around 6 to 7 questions. So here also, if you want to prepare smartly, because see, this is a competition, you have to qualify at the end. So we need to take the edge, and the edge is going to come from understanding the pattern. So if you look at question paper, you will realize Buddhism and Jainism, that is the most important area. So you need to study that in a lot of detail. There are some areas where relatively a lesser number of questions are coming, so that can be read from one book or just from the notes. Okay, so this is how you need to strategize. Now coming to the books, are you aware of any books? NCRTs. Okay. So see, if you have not studied anything yet, or if you don't have the basic understanding of the subject, these are 2 books that we have prepared. Okay. This is for foundation. This is going to cover ancient and medieval. So these are the chapters, and important foundational details are here. So if you start from this book, it's not that confusing, because if you study NCRTs, it becomes confusing after a time, at least in certain chapters, because information is overloaded. So you need to simplify that. So if you are a beginner, I would suggest read this book. This is for ancient and medieval, and this one is for modern. Okay. So if you have the basic idea, you can then go through NCRT, and it will be much more simpler for you to understand NCRTs. When you are studying ancient, go through R.S. Sharma's NCRT. That is going to be your basic book and probably the only book. Because if you look at other books, you will realize they are very bulky and you will not be able to understand it properly. So keep NCRTs as your base, and if there are additional informations, keep adding those, because when you are going to take the classes, you are obviously going to get a lot of information which is not there in your NCRT. Okay, so keep adding those. That is going to be about the book list when it comes to ancient. In medieval, again, NCRT is going to be your basic book. When we come to modern, then you have to read Bipin Chandra's book, and after that there is spectrum, which is very important because you also need to have factual knowledge to clear prelims, and Bipin Chandra does not contain a lot of factual knowledge. So spectrum is good for that, but to develop your comprehensive understanding about a topic, Bipin Chandra's book is a must. Okay. Now today we are going to start with ancient. So what is the syllabus of ancient? If you have to go through that, here we start from lithic age. Lithic age. Okay, but before going through lithic age, I would cover sources first. Why sources? Because when we study history, how this history is being reconstructed, how historians are telling us this is what has happened. So they go through certain sources, they look at the information and then they write their research. Okay, so we will talk about that. How do we reconstruct history? Then we are going to start with lithic age. What do we mean by lithic age? Lithic means stone. Okay, so a time when humans were using stone to construct their tools. That time period is called lithic age. Here we will broadly study 4 areas: Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic and Chalcolithic. Okay, so Paleolithic is a time when humans started making tools for the first time. Then Mesolithic, this is a phase of transition. When you start doing something, you realize that these are the improvements that you could do. So when humans first started making tools, those tools were very heavy, those tools were not very polished. What will happen? Gradually they'll realize that they need to make lighter tools. There are going to be other geographical, environmental changes as well, which is going to lead to some lifestyle changes. That is why we categorize this period as a different period. We'll study what are the changes that are coming. Here we need to understand what is the basic syllabus. Okay. Then other changes are going to come in Neolithic era. Before the Neolithic time, humans were hunter and gatherers. When we come to Neolithic, these people started practicing agriculture. Okay, so this is the difference that is going to come here. With agriculture, a lot of changes will come. For example, when you are practicing agriculture, you need to settle down. You cannot move around every other day. And with settling down, again, there is going to be a wave of changes in social life, in political life that we'll see. Okay, so this era becomes very important for significant changes that came in the lifestyle of humans. Okay, after that we'll study Chalcolithic period. What happened here? So humans were already using stone tools. Here what they started doing? They started using copper tools as well. That is the basic change that is going to come here. Okay, that is why we categorize it as a different era. Okay. After this, see, humans have started practicing agriculture. They have started using various tools of metals as well. Now, when you practice agriculture, you are producing crops which you are going to eat. But when you are settling down, there are other needs as well. When you are producing crops, you need to cook it. You need to settle down at a place, so you will build houses. So there are a lot of things which requires craft, skill, and for that there will be a certain set of people who are going to become craftspeople. There will be certain set of people who will become agriculturalists. Now what they'll do? They'll exchange their services, and from there trade is going to start. And when the nature of trade will become complex, we will talk about civilizations. Okay. So after Chalcolithic, we will study Harappan civilization. Okay. Again, there are other traits as well which we will study when we will come to Harappan civilization. So this was India's first civilization and one of the world's oldest civilization. There are going to be different characteristics why Harappan civilization was so important, what is it that makes it so unique when we compare it to other contemporary civilization. So the kind of town planning they had, the kind of focus they had on sanitation, the kind of drainage system that they built, all those things were very unique for that particular time. And even if you look at the present day problems of urbanization, specifically in India, you can take inspiration from here. We will look at all those aspects when we will discuss Harappan civilization. Okay. After that, Vedic culture is going to come. What is happening here? So here there was an urban civilization which is Harappan civilization. There is another set of people who are going to come from different areas. So there is, when we talk about the homeland of Aryans, the issue is very much debated. Largely what we agree that they have come from Central Asian land. Okay, so when they are coming, their lifestyle is completely different. So we will study how they are different from Hadappans. What are the kind of changes that are coming in the lifestyle of humans at this particular time? Okay, so the larger area that we will study is 1500 to 600 BCE, and we are going to look at different changes in economic, political, social, religious, cultural sphere of humans that are going to come when these people are going to come to Indian subcontinent and settle down here. Okay, so here again these people were village people. They were first nomadic and then they started agriculture. These were urban people. So now what has happened? These people will again start practicing agriculture. What will happen? The same thing, craft production and trade. So when you practice trade, cities are going to emerge. So you will see after this, there is this period of Mahajanpad. Okay, so there are going to be emergence of various cities and simultaneously various smaller states who are going to fight with each other for supremacy. So there are 16 of them which we will study, and when we study those and the fight that was taking place, at the end we see that Magad was the Mahajanpad which is going to emerge victorious. Why Magad emerged victorious? We will study. There are various reasons for that. Okay, now when Magad is emerging victorious, there is the birth of first empire of Indian subcontinent, that is Mauryan Empire. Mauryan Empire. Okay, so we will roughly talk about 3rd century BC. See, again, when you are studying history, there is this misconception that you have to study you have to remember each and every date. Okay, that is not something we are going to do here. Of course, we will write dates, but you don't have to mug everything up. If you tell somebody, people who are from humanities background, they can understand. If you tell somebody that you are studying history, the first question that they will ask, when did the Battle of Panipat happen? They are concerned about nothing but the dates. But if you study history thoroughly, you will realize that dates are not that important. What is important? The larger changes, the larger socio-economic, cultural changes that are coming. Okay, and that is something that UPSC wants you to understand. If you look at the question paper, they are hardly asking dates. They will not ask you when did the Battle of Panipat happen. They will ask you why battles were fought at Panipat. Why Panipat was that important? When you are talking about any particular area, when you are talking about Kannauj, for example, we will talk about Kannauj. Why the whole focus is shifted to Kannauj, not to any other area. So this is related to the socio-economic changes that is coming in the society. They will not ask you when they are shifting to Kannauj, or when was certain battle fought for the supremacy of Kannauj. The larger question is why, not when. Okay, and this is something you need to think about when preparing for this examination. It has become very conceptual if you look at the question papers. Okay, now coming to Mauryan Empire. Here we are again going to look at why we call Mauryan Empire an empire. Before Mauryan Empire also, there are going to be various dynasties who are going to fight with each other. Why they were not called an empire? That is the first question that we will answer. After that, we will try to understand the economy, the polity, the society, religion, culture at the time of Mauryan Empire. What are the kind of people which inhabited the Mauryan Empire, and how when people of different identities meet, they make a cultural difference. Okay, that is something we are going to study. See, at the time of Mahajanpad, there is birth of two very important religions in Indian subcontinent, Buddhism and Jainism. Buddhism and Jainism. But we will not study it here. Why? There is a reason. Because when you study Buddhism and Jainism, they are arising in 6th century BCE. But you need to understand the larger developments as well which took place, and those developments are taking place in the coming centuries. So what I do after I finish post-Mauryan Empire, then I talk about Jainism and Buddhism, because then we will be able to talk about it in a linear manner, that see, this is something which is happening, this is how changes are coming, and you will be in a better position to understand the changes. Because if I tell you about all the changes just after Mahajanpad, you will not be able to understand the contribution of Mauryan times, you will not be able to comprehend why there are certain things which are happening in post-Mauryan times. Okay, that is why it's better that we study it after we have finished post-Mauryan kingdoms. Okay, so but it is emerging here only in 6th century BCE. So when we study Buddhism and Jainism, what do we talk about? We talk about the reasons why Buddhism and Jainism are arising. After that, what do we study? See, when you talk about this particular time, there were around 64 religions which emerged. Why Buddhism and Jainism became that important? That is another question which we need to answer. So we look at those reasons as well, why Buddhism and Jainism only. And even when we compare Buddhism and Jainism together, you will realize that Buddhism got much more support when compared to Jainism. So what was the reason for that? Why Buddhism got so popular? At the same time, why Buddhism is going to die down in the country of its own origin? If you look at Buddhism and Jainism, even today you will see that Jainism spread to certain key areas, but it has survived in those areas even today. If you look at Buddhism, it spread largely in the Indian subcontinent from north to south. But you will see that there is hardly Buddhist population which lives in Indian subcontinent today. So why these changes are coming? That is also something which we will answer. What kind of culture Buddhism is going to inspire? So when we talk about culture, what does come under culture? Broadly, if you have to talk about culture, what do we understand by culture? See, a very basic definition is everything that is created by humans is part of culture. Okay, go to the very basics of definitions, because then you will be able to understand history or any other subject in a very better way. Okay, so anything and everything that has been created by humans, that's part of our culture. So when we talk about culture, so we speak, we have created languages. When we speak, there are certain languages which we also write in. So there comes literature. So language and literature. We started wearing clothes. So what kind of clothes? What kind of paintings? We started making sculptures. What kind of sculptures? We started making houses to live in. What kind of architecture has Buddhism inspired? Has Buddhism influenced any of these areas of our lives? How we behave with people, what are our moral ideas? Has Buddhism had certain impacts on all these areas? This is something that we will talk about, and the same thing we talk about in the case of Jainism. Okay, so we will talk about the cultural impact of Buddhism as well as Jainism. That is something that you have to study here. At the same time, you also need to study the details of Buddhist as well as Jain philosophy. So first, we will study the philosophy. What is it that they are talking about? See, there is a philosophical tradition that already exists before the coming of Buddhism and Jainism. It is coming in 6th century BCE. So what is their view on the existing philosophical tradition? And then we will study how both these religions influenced the lifestyle of humans. Okay, and after that we will study their gradual decline. So this is going to come under Buddhism and Jainism, and here we are going to talk roughly about 8 centuries. Okay. Now coming back here, when Mauryan Empire declined, there are going to be birth of several smaller states. Okay, and that we study under post-Mauryan. Post-Mauryan. So after the decline of Mauryan Empire, there was not a single empire which existed. There are going to be many smaller kingdoms. Again, we will study all these terms. Why am I calling Mauryan Empire empire, or why we are using the term state or kingdom? These are some concepts that we are going to study gradually. Okay, under them, see, there are going to be various states. Why? Because you have you have heard of Great Chinese Wall. So it was built during this time. What you will see, when you study international relations, we study international relations in our present times, and we try to understand. So if you study the changes that are taking place in, for example, United States of America, or Europe, or West Asia, what do we study? How those changes are affecting us. That's why we study international relations in the first place. When it comes to history, specifically ancient and medieval, we forget the role of things that are happening in our neighborhood. Why? We don't want to think in that way. But if you look at the larger historical developments, it has a very important role to play. Whatever was happening in Central Asia, whatever was happening in Europe or in China, that has impacted the history of Indian subcontinent very significantly. So what you will see, the Great Chinese Wall was built. When we are talking about India or China, these areas have been very productive areas in terms of agriculture, in terms of mineral resources, specifically Indian subcontinent. If you talk about Central Asia, today they have oil resources. Think about the time ancient and medieval. Were they even useful? So if you look at that area, that was not very productive in terms of resources. So what were those people doing? Those people were migrating to different areas where they could find resources. They were going to China, they were coming to Indian subcontinent. That is why you will see that a whole lot of people have come to Indian subcontinent. We have not gone to other areas because we had sufficient resources. Why would you move out of your homeland if you are getting sufficient resources? So here you will see that there has been an influx of identities who have migrated to Indian subcontinent historically. Okay, now when people also have the option of going to China, the population is going to be divided. Now what is happening at this point of time? The Great Chinese Wall is built. That is why you will see in post-Mauryan times there are going to be various people who will migrate to Indian subcontinent because they did not have the option to go to China. Okay, so here we will study about certain dynasties and their very important details. You don't need to go into the details of Parthians or Scythians or Indo-Greeks. There are certain important details that I will make you write down in the class. Only that is something that you have to study. So there are people who are going to come from outside like Indo-Greeks and others. We will study some important details about them. Otherwise, they are not very important. What is important in post-Mauryan times? So there are going to be 3 dynasties which become very important. Kushanas. Kushanas also came from outside, but they are going to build a very big empire in North India and northwestern frontier provinces, and they have contributed very significantly in the development of Indian culture. So all those things we are going to study here. Again, see, when you look at post-Mauryan times, you need to understand that the larger political history is missing. Because how do you know about political history? You need list of the kings, that is missing. See, when we are, so suppose we are living today. If something happens and the whole population vanishes, Somebody might come here after 200 years, but the books that we have produced, it might not last because it can decay. It's not something which is permanent. Okay, they might not be able to use our electronic devices. So how will they know about us? They will know about us if any fragment of cloth survives, or grains survive, or this pen, or this board. So they might know, okay, these were the kind of things they were using, but this is part of our cultural history. They might not know our names. They might not know about our political history. That is how, if you look at the history of ancient and medieval India, that is how history has been reconstructed. So if names of rulers have not existed for us, we will not be able to know about larger political history. Kings who have left their names engraved on stone, because stone is going to survive, and if you are able to read that language, you will be able to know, okay, this is the king, this is something that he has or she has done. Okay, so in this period you will see that larger political history is missing. We know about certain important kings. So there are few kings about whose achievement you need to know. That is something that we will discuss. But this period becomes very important in terms of culture. Okay, that is something that you need to know here. So this is Kushanas. These were the people who came from outside, and here we will prominently be talking about north. Now the other is Satvahans. They were the natives in Deccan area prominently till the area of Andhra. So Andhra, Maharashtra, that was the larger domain where they ruled. The same is the problem with them as well. You will not be able to know the larger political history. There are some important kings about whom you get some information, but culturally their time period was also very important. Okay, so that is something we are going to study here. The third one is Sangam. Again, in political realm, the problem is even bigger here. You will hardly get names of any of the rulers. Okay, but this period is also very important culturally, because there was a lot of literature which was being produced at this point of time, and we have been able to study those. Okay, so we will study the larger cultural details of Sangam and some political details that we are able to find. Okay, here when we are talking about Sangam, they are deep south, prominently in the area of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Okay, so that is something we are going to study in post-Mauryas. Now, after post-Mauryas, when we are talking about this time period, in the case of Sangam, this is 300 CE. Okay, here the dates vary a bit, but largely 300 CE. You understand BCE, CE? So, AD, that has religious connotations, so that is, or BC. Before Christ padhte, Anno Domini padhte, that has religious connotation. That is why in present times, the term that is being used by historians is BCE and CE. BCE for BC. तो इसको क्या बोलते हैं? Before Common Era. This is Common Era. Okay. So this is the abbreviation that I will be using. Just give me a minute. Okay. So now, when we have finished post-Mauryan, what we will study after that? We will study Guptas. Gupta Empire, another very important empire. Here we will study the political history in terms of culture. See, whenever you study political history, in ancient India, you must have seen in the questions that they will not ask you about important battles. They will ask you about the cultural contributions of specific kings. For example, Guptas, so they can ask you about Samudragupta, they can ask you about Chandragupta. When we are talking about Mauryas, they can ask you about Ashok. When we are talking about Kushanas, they can ask you about Kanishk. So the larger cultural contributions that they have made, that is something that you need to understand. Okay. So in the Gupta era, Again, we will study the political history, economic, social, religious, cultural, and when we will study all these things, there is the term golden age that has been used in the context of Guptas. We will also try to understand whether that terminology is right to use or not, and you will realize that in terms of culture that is very appropriate, but in terms of social changes that were coming, that is not appropriate to use. And what are the reasons for that, we will study when we will study Gupta era. Okay, after Guptas there is post Gupta. Here in ancient we study till Harsha. After that there is tripartite struggle, there is Pallavas and Chalukyas, then Cholas. So largely we study all those areas in medieval. We will see if we are left with time, we can go beyond Harsha as well. Otherwise that will be covered in medieval. That comes under medieval. Ancient history we study till the reign of Harsha. Okay, now we have understood largely the syllabus. What is it that you have to study? What kind of questions are being asked? So if we start from very early, the very first topic that we have discussed. So what I am going to do, I will take the trend of last 10 years, and on the basis of that I am going to tell you which areas are being asked, and if some area is being asked, what kind of questions are being asked. I am assuming you are writing it simultaneously. Okay, try to write the important areas as well. Now when it comes to lithic age, in the past 10 years, no question has been asked in prelims. Okay, so we understand that according to the trend, we don't need to go into the factual details of lithic age. What is being asked from here? There was one question in mains in 2015 or 16. I am not remembering the exact year. What was the question about? The question was about rock art. What do we mean by rock art? A kind of art that is being produced on stone, on rock. The basic definition is that. What? Yes? Petroglyphs is not rock art. Petroglyphs is kind of engravings. We will discuss these details. What is a petroglyph? What is painting? Okay, these are different things. Now coming to rock art is basically paintings that have been done. When you talk about petroglyph, what do? We scratch the surface. Okay, that is not painting. That is scratching or engraving. That is different from painting. So what they had asked you to compare the Mesolithic rock paintings with modern paintings, and do they bear any kind of aesthetic similarity. So here what we understand, we are able to understand that they are asking about Mesolithic paintings, but at the same time they want you to understand it in comparative manner. They are asking you to compare it with modern paintings. Okay, so you will see that this is one kind of question which is often being asked. They are trying to draw parallels between ancient and medieval, or between ancient and modern, or between ancient and contemporary times. So this is also one of the ways UPSC is asking questions in your mains examination. In prelims also, you must have seen in this year's question paper, there was one question which was relating National Handloom Day to Swadeshi movement. Okay, so this kind of question is also being asked. What kind of relation do we share in present times with our ancient or medieval or modern past? Okay, so this is the area that was asked. We need to understand what kind of paintings have these people produced. Are they beautiful enough, aesthetic enough to be comparable to contemporary as well as modern paintings? Okay, this is the area you need to focus upon. Again, painting part of culture. Mains में क्या पूछते हैं? They ask you about culture. Okay, coming to Harappa. This area is very important. for prelims as well as for mains. Here what do they ask you? Sometimes they compare both these areas. What is the difference or similarity between Harappans and Vedics? So here what do you need to know? You need to know the key characteristics of Harappans as well as Vedic people, so that you can compare the details which have been given there. That is one thing that is asked in prelims, what comparison of Harappans and Vedics. Second thing that is asked in prelims is important discoveries at certain places. So details of sites. For example, they'll give you a detail that this kind of arrangement is found in Dhaulavira, Kalibangan, Banavali, Lothal, and you will have to choose the right option. So what are the important discoveries at certain places? Again, when they ask these kind of questions, here there is a trick to answer these questions. You need to know the exceptions. Because if they are asking you that this script has been found in this area, those areas are being called Harappan areas of Harappan civilization because they do possess certain similarities. So what will they ask you? They will ask you exceptions. If there is something that is found in Mohenjo-daro but not at any other site of Harappan civilization, that automatically becomes important. Okay, so you need to understand and remember the exceptions because similarities are going to be at every site. That is not something that makes sense to ask in the exam. So this is something that you need to understand from the perspective of prelims. What about mains? So in mains also this area is being asked a lot. What kind of questions have been asked? So again, I talked about this fact that they try to draw similarity with present times. So you will see there was one question in 2015 where they had asked you what kind of inspiration or how can Harappan civilization solve our present day problems of urbanization. What inspiration can you take from Harappan civilization? Here what do you need to understand? First you need to understand the problems of present day urbanization, and then you need to look at Harappan civilization and their urbanization pattern, and you need to find out whether we can draw inspiration from that or not. So what are the problems of our present day urbanization? Drainage system is one of the problems. But even before going there, we need to understand how do we plan cities? Do we even plan them? So you will see that most of the Indian cities are unplanned. From there all the problem is going to arise because they are unplanned. So the problem of traffic, the problem of drainage, the problem of ventilation, all these problems are arising from there. If you look at Harappan civilization, we know that they had planned cities. Okay, their roads were built first, then they were making their houses. So they made their roads, then they built their drains, and then they built houses. अभी हम क्या करते हैं, घर पहले बनाते हैं, नाला कहाँ से निकलेगा बाद में सोचते हैं. So that is why the problem of drainage is there in our present day society. If you look at Harappa, they were planning all these things beforehand. So we look at certain key aspects of Harappan civilization and their urbanization pattern, and we will discuss this as well, how we can take inspiration from Harappan civilization to solve our present day problems of urbanization. That is one kind of question that is asked. Again, here you not only need to understand the past, but also need to understand your present and the kind of similarities that have persisted, okay, or the differences if any. Okay, that is one of the questions that was asked. What was the other set of question that was asked? So you will see the other question that was asked again was about the similarities. See, when we talk about history, if people have started growing rice, for example, will they abandon growing rice because the king has changed? No. no matter what is happening with the political setup, people are going to lead their lives in more or less the similar way. Okay, and that is what has happened throughout the history of human civilization. Again, this is the myth कि इतिहास जो है वो राजाओं का है, रजवाड़ों का है. History is also about common people and their lifestyle. So if you look at our past and present day society, there are certain similarities which have continued. So one question they had asked was about the similarities that you can trace from your past civilizations to present day society. So when they said civilization, we find Harappan civilization. So you had to trace the similarity from Harappan civilization to present day life. Now again, this is not a typical history question. Here you need to understand the larger historical development. So the kind of crops, the kind of food that they were eating. Do we eat the same kind of food today? If you look at the agricultural pattern, for example, I'll show you one of the pictures where which we find from Kalibangan. So that is the earliest example of agriculture with plough. So plough, you will find the ploughed field in Kalibangan. That is the first example in the whole world of a ploughed field. Okay, and if you look at that field, you will realize they were growing two crops together. Do we not do that even today in India? Our cropping pattern is mostly like that. If you look at Mughal times, you will find this term in Abul Fazl's book, Do Fasla. That means two crops are being grown together. That is another similarity that you find. Okay, if you look at the, if you have looked at the dancing girl from Harappa in your school, pictures होते हैं, किताब में हमारे फोटो होती है, उसको देखेंगे. If you look at her, she has made a bun. If you look at the hairdo of women even today in India, they do prefer making a bun. That is one of the similarities. If you look at the necklace that she is wearing, more or less the same kind of necklace is very popular today. Look at the way she is wearing her bangles. So the whole arm is covered with bangles. Go to present day Rajasthan and you will find mostly rural women wearing bangles in that way only. So this is again another cultural similarity that has existed in terms of dressing pattern, in terms of ornaments that we use. You will see, I will show you the pictures, that there is one of the seals on which they are worshipping the people tree. Is that tree not worshipped in India today? You will see that that is a very popular and very sacred tree in India even today. And there are some of the popular festivals, local festivals centered around the worshipping of people tree. So there are various cultural traits that have continued from Harappan times to our present day society. Again, when you study history, so what I do, first I show you pictures, so that you are able, so when you are looking at pictures, you will be able to notice all these details. What kind of dress they are wearing, what kind of ornaments are they wearing, how have they done their hair. So when you look at these things, please notice the smaller little details and try to understand the similarities or differences which exist. Because if you look at the nature of UPSC, it has become very unpredictable. They can ask you literally anything in mains examination. They can ask you to trace the dressing pattern from ancient to modern. How will you do that? You need to pay closer attention to the pictures. Okay, and again, this is something which you will not find in books. So that is another limitation. So you will have to rely on your classes, and all these details you cannot write down as well. So when you notice the larger changing patterns, then only you will be able to answer it. Okay. So these are the things I'll keep telling you. Notice this, notice that. Okay. So try to develop that habit of noticing smaller details. Now, so this was another kind of question that was asked from Harappan civilization in mains. The third kind of question that can be asked is how Harappan civilization differed from its contemporaries. Whether it was an advanced civilization when compared to contemporaries or not. So, what do you have to say about it? People who know some of the basics about history. क्या लगता है आपको? बेहतर थी या नहीं थी? अर्बनाइज तो सब थे. Organized, okay. So why these kind of questions are being asked, where they are asking you advanced or primitive? Why these terms are being used? See, you are going to become a bureaucrat. You will have to deal with various kinds of people. Some of them might be developed in terms of their economy. Some of them might be underdeveloped. What happens mostly that we try to associate the idea of civilization with economic development of a certain society. So when a person who is having certain kind of bias, when that person will write an answer, that person is going to say Harappan civilization was the most advanced civilization of the world. What does it tell us about that person? That person probably has a superiority complex, that everything good was there only in Harappa. But when you look at the history of ancient civilizations, what you will notice? You will notice that there are certain things which are obviously unique in Harappan civilization, but there are certain things which are unique in Mesopotamia as well, in Egypt as well. So when these kind of questions are being asked, try to be very balanced. Okay, you have to show that this civilization was very unique with respect to Indian subcontinent as well as when compared to the contemporaries, but it was not the only civilization which possessed unique features. Okay, so there what you have to do, even if you write 2 lines about the unique features of Mesopotamia and Egypt, your answer is going to be balanced. Okay, again there is a problem, because in your books you will not find these details. So I will dictate you in the class that see, this is the feature that you can cite when it comes to Mesopotamia or when it comes to Egypt. Okay, and those details you can use in the examination. So this is the kind of question that is being asked from Harappan civilization. Okay, coming to Vedic culture. So if you come to Vedic culture, again in prelims the question is asked with respect to Harappa, that what are the differences between the two. In mains, what you can do, when they have asked you to trace the similarities from ancient cultures to contemporary times, you can take the example of Harappan civilization as well as Vedic culture. So the same question is here as well, otherwise no question has been asked in the last 10 years. We are taking the data of 10 years because the pattern was changed in 2014. Okay. That is why we are using the paper from 14. Now coming to Mahajanpadas, again when it comes to prelims, they have asked certain factual details. You cannot remember every detail. See, when it comes to prelims examination, keep this thing very clear in mind, that if you are able to answer 60 questions correctly, you will qualify. If you look at the cutoff, it is between 80 to 90 for the past 2 years. Okay, and I am talking about general category. If you take the highest, that has been 105 in the history of 116. 16. Which year? 27. No, take 17. No, take the data of last 5 years when it comes to prelims. Okay, so if you look at the details, the highest cutoff has been 105. Okay, if you are able to score 120, you are in the safe zone. This is not going to decide your rank. So again, when it comes to the strategy, you need to be very specific about your mains preparation. Why? because this is going to decide your rank. The larger marks you are going to get from here. Why am I saying this? Because see, I have seen students who prepare and who constantly, I have a student who has cleared prelims 5 times, but he has not been able to clear mains even once. Why? He was very good at facts, and if you look at his marks, he has scored above 130. So he was very good with prelims preparation, but not good at all with mains preparation. And this is just one example. There are several students who are able to qualify prelims but not mains. There are students who are so thorough with their mains preparation that when they cleared prelims for the first time, they were able to score good ranks, under 10, under 20. Why? Because mains is the deciding factor. If you miss even one question in mains, you will not be able to get good rank even if you qualify. If you are missing even 10 questions in prelims, there is a very good chance that you will qualify. So here also you need to strategize your preparation. How much time you have to dedicate to prelims, how much time you have to dedicate to mains. Why am I saying this? Because see, when you are studying, you will study. There are certain details that you will study. Most of the times what happens, we are not able to translate it on paper. We have good knowledge, we don't know how to write precisely. Because when you write mains answer, recently I was taking mains specific classes for students who have qualified prelims. They have very good knowledge, but they don't know the pointed details. That was the biggest shortcoming, because when a question like this is being asked, how Harappan civilization was advanced when compared to its contemporary civilizations. Here, can you write 2 pages? Can you write 3 pages? No, there is a word limit. If they are asking you to write this question in 150 words, you have to write it in 150 words. Earlier, when the exam used to take place, you could have written as much as you wanted, because there was this provision of taking B, C, D sheets. Now it's not there. So here you need to be very precise. How will you become precise? By looking at the important details, by making concise notes. Okay. Also, what you should do, try practicing. When I start a class, after finishing a topic, I ask my students that go write a question based on this at home. Okay, and then you can evaluate it yourself. You can get it evaluated by me as well, so that you have this habit of writing from the very start, and then you will also be able to understand what to write and what not to write. Okay, that is another habit that you have to develop. Then only you are going to be able to get good marks in mains. Otherwise, if you are scoring 117 prelims, it will not matter if you are not able to qualify mains, or if you are not able to get good marks in mains. So keep all these things in mind while preparing. Coming back to Mahajanpad, why I was saying this? Because if they are asking you, what do you find in the area of Ashmak? A very difficult question. They can give you certain details. They can ask you where Jetwan is situated. Nobody can remember it. Somebody who has very good depth of history, somebody who is doing only that subject, that person will remember it, because that person is studying only history. You have to study a lot of subjects. So here you also need to understand what to attempt and what to leave when it comes to prelims. So what I am going to do, I will give you details of certain findings in important Mahajanpadas. If you can remember them, remember them. If you are not able to remember them, that's not an issue. Okay, because only one question was asked in past 10 years prelims, and that was a very difficult question. Most of the students were not able to attempt that, except the ones who were writing the exam with history optional. Okay, so there are going to be certain questions which you will not be able to answer. That's not a problem. You need to choose your strong areas when it comes to prelims. Okay, So Mahajanpad is one such topic where you can find these kind of questions which are going to irritate you. So don't worry a lot about that. We'll discuss important details. Try to remember those. When it comes to mains, you will not find any question which has been asked in mains. So this topic is not that important if you look at it from that perspective. Coming to Mauryan Empire, a very important topic. Why? You will see in prelims constantly there are questions which have been asked. What kind of questions? So you will find that they will give you certain terminology. In prelims, terms have also become important now. So they will give you terminologies and they will ask you the meaning of that particular term. Okay. So from Mauryan era, they have given terms related to administrative units and administrative posts, and they have asked the meaning of that. That is one area from where questions are asked. Second kind of question that is being asked from Mauryan in prelims is about Ashoka's Dhamma policy. That is another favorite area of UPSC. Again, see, the kind of depth that they will go into, that can vary. Why am I saying this? Again, when we study history, what we do? We study history in a very static way. History is obviously static. It is not going to change because something that has happened, it has happened. But history writing is a dynamic process. So if you talk about Harappan civilization, we did not know about it before 1924. We lost connection with our history. So we found something new. We found Arthashastra in 1905. We found the Darganj Yakshi in 1917. So rediscoveries are happening, and when any rediscovery happens, the way we look at our history, that perspective changes. Okay, so you need to look at the important discoveries in present times. Again, you are not history students, you cannot go into each and every detail. What is the way to prepare for it? Go through the newspaper. If there is something which is new in the newspaper, for example, excavations at Rakhigadi were happening. When excavation was happening there, was it not covered in news? It was covered in news. So you don't need to go to the ASI manual. You need to just read your newspaper. When you are reading your newspaper and you have found, okay, in Rakhigadi, this we have found, relate it with your static history. Okay, and if you understand the pattern, you will realize that whatever is in the news, they ask questions based on that. In 2019, our Prime Minister went to Mamallapuram and his pictures were everywhere in front of every leading newspaper, in front of the Great Penance Relief. The exact question was asked in prelims, where is Great Penance Relief located? Okay, so if you look at the current happenings, you will be in a very good position to at least guess important topics. Another example I will give you. In 2022, Russia-Ukraine war was going on. If you look at the question paper, there was a very detailed question on Ashoka's Dhamma policy. Which edict talks about what detail? Those kind of questions are not being expected from UPSC. If you look at, because this is GS, general studies, that was a very specific question. But why was it asked? If you think about it, war doesn't benefit anybody. Okay, even the victors, because they also lose a lot of economic wealth, a lot of human wealth. Okay, who is the king in India who has talked about the idea of peace and renouncing war? Ashok. So they related the present debate. When war happens, there is always this debate which happens amongst intellectuals, even common people, whether is this war beneficial, was it even needed? If you have to relate it to history, you have a very big example of Ashok renouncing the war and even declaring it at a royal level. Okay, that was one question which was asked. Buddhism is constantly being asked. Why? Because Buddhism is a religion which talks about integrating people, which talks about peace, which talks about the idea of inclusivity. When you live in a time which is not very predictable, where you find a lot of disturbances of any kind, you will go back to a tradition which talks about unity. As a future bureaucrat, you have to believe in the idea of inclusivity. You have to believe in the idea of unity. They would want you to know about India's ancient past or medieval past in this manner. There are questions which are constantly being asked on Buddhism and Bhakti movement. Why? Because it tells you about India's inclusive history, India's syncretic culture. Okay, so you also need to look at the values that you need to inculcate as a bureaucrat, and where can you get inspiration from our past about those values. So UPSC also asks on those topics. Again, 2023 का question paper, prelims 14 questions, 6 questions were from Buddhism. So look at the percentage. 4 एरियाज पूछने हैं, 4 एरिया में से एक एरिया के एक टॉपिक से 6 सवाल पूछा है 14 में से. Does it not tell you about something? Does it not tell you about the mindset of UPSC? What do they want you to prepare? Okay, so they do want you to look at India's inclusive history. So this area becomes very इंपॉर्टेंट. मौर्यन में आपसे प्रीलिम्स में पूछा है, मेंस में कोई सवाल ऐसा नहीं पूछा है. अगर कभी पूछेंगे तो दे कैन आस्क यू अबाउट अशोकास धम्मा पॉलिसी. दैट इज कल्चरली वेरी रेलेवेंट. ओके, कमिंग टू बुद्धिज्म एंड जैनिज्म, अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक. यू शुड नो एनीथिंग एंड एवरीथिंग अबाउट at least Buddhism, if not Jainism. Okay, so what you do need to know here: why Buddhism and Jainism originated, what was the reasons for its spread, why did it decline in Indian subcontinent, why Buddhism spread a lot when compared to Jainism. These are the conceptual details that you need to know. Then you need to know about important sites which are related to Buddhism and Jainism. Who are the important kings who have patronized Buddhism and Jainism? Why did they do so? What are the important cultural details related to it? What is the kind of culture that both these religions have promoted in terms of literature? So important books that have been produced by Buddhist scholars or with respect to Buddhism. Important sculptures that are prevailing. When we are showing Buddha in human form, in anthropomorphic form, how do you depict Buddha? Why there are certain sculptures where Buddha is touching the earth? Why there are certain sculptures where he is folding the hand or he is doing certain hand gestures? What is the meaning of all those symbols? That is also something that you need to understand. What is the concept of Bodhisattva? Why there is a constant talk about Buddha's previous birth? What is the ideas that Buddhism believes in? All these details you need to go through. Okay, and we will discuss these details, that what do we mean by all these things. Okay, so this is one area which is very important from prelims as well as from mains perspective. And whatever I told you right now, they have asked questions from all those areas, okay, when it comes to Buddhism and Jainism. Moving further, post-Mauryan, Kushana, Satvahans, Sangam. They have asked you about the cultural history of these 3 dynasties. What have they asked you? They can ask you about important sites. When we study Kushan and Satavahan, their cultural history is very much related to the history of Buddhism only. So most of the things are going to be covered when we will study Buddhism, cultural impact of Buddhism. Okay, here there are certain sites which are important. Again, those sites are mostly Buddhist sites. Okay, there are certain sites which are important from the perspective of trade. We'll go through those and we'll try to understand. Again, see, when it comes to sites, you are not history optional students. People who are taking history as an optional, they need to know about details of important sites. Here also they will ask you about sites which are in the news. At least this is the pattern that I have seen till now. They ask you about Muziri. It was in the news. Newspapers covered it because there were excavations which were taking place in and around the area of Muziri. So it was already in the Hindu. Okay. So they have not asked you something new. You need to study the newspaper. You know that. And these things have been in the newspaper. So if you look at the reaction of students, they were very much surprised that the UPSC is going into this much of detail. But the failure was theirs because they were not able to cover the news properly. See, what is the larger mentality? Skip the news related to history. हम पढ़ते हैं, इकोनॉमी पढ़ते हैं, IR पढ़ते हैं. That is our major focus. साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी का पेज पढ़ते हैं. जहां हिस्ट्री से रिलेटेड कोई न्यूज आती है, पेज पलट देते हैं, ये तो एनसीईआरटी में. ठीक है, यू डोंट हैव टू डू दैट. You need to look at the news pertaining to history as well. And there is not a lot of news. आपको 10 दिन में कोई एक आर्टिकल मिल जाएगा जिसका हिस्ट्री से कोई रिलेशन होगा. It's not that difficult to read that and try to jot down the information, okay, which is there. So now important sites you have to remember from this area. Sangam has become very important. Again, constantly there is a talk about Sangam age in the news as well. Recently Kashi Tamil Sangamam took place. What is it trying to establish? The historical relation between north and south. What was it based upon? The Sangam texts that have been produced. Okay, and there was one of the questions, Vattakirutal. What is the meaning of Vattakirutal which is mentioned in Sangam texts? So they are asking areas which have been in the news. तो आप जिस भी साल के लिए प्रिपेयर कर रहे हैं, आप उस साल का न्यूज देखिए, कौन सा एरिया न्यूज में रहा है. ट्राई टू हैव अ गुड ग्रिप ऑन इट एंड देन रीड डिटेल्स विच आर रिलेटेड टू दैट. ओके, सो संगम इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एरिया फ्रॉम प्रीलिम्स पर्सपेक्टिव. मेंस में ऐसा सवाल अब नहीं पूछा है. 13 में देयर वाज वन क्वेश्चन विच वाज आस्क्ड कि संगम का सोशल और इकोनॉमिक हिस्ट्री क्या आपको पता लगता है. कवर दैट इन द क्लास. ओके, सो दिस इज समथिंग दैट यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड हियर. Coming to Gupta's, again a topic which is very important both from prelims as well as mains. They can ask you about important sites. They have asked you about important contributions of certain kings. Again, cultural contribution mostly. Okay, so this is something you need to study from prelims perspective. What about mains? So they have asked you questions on Gupta coins. Okay. How quality of coins deteriorated after Guptas. A very specific question. Again, I will tell you how to answer these kind of questions. Okay, so Gupta Empire becomes very important. Harsh. So if you look at post-Gupta times, with respect to Harsh, it's not important for mains perspective. But it does become a bit important from prelims perspective. In what regard? So you need to know about the important literature that was being produced, because in architecture they did not make a lot of architecture. It was a time which was relatively of economic decay. When do you produce big architecture? When you have money. So if you look at any period where large scale construction activities have taken place, there has been an economic flourishment. Then only they were able to support such grand activities in terms of construction. So when there is a time which is of relative economic decay, you can be very sure that they might not have produced a lot of art and architecture. Though there are certain texts which were being composed at this point of time, we will look at the details of those texts, and that is something which has been asked in prelims, not more than that. So which are important areas which we need to understand in a detailed manner? Gupta, that is a very important topic. Here Sangam, a very important topic. Otherwise, cultural history, which will be covered with Buddhism. This is the most important topic that you have to study. Mauryan, again an important topic. Harappa, a very important topic. So you have understood largely what you have to study and in how much depth. Okay, is there any doubt till now?
Apart from getting this cultural or social epistemology, what other practical pertinence does this history, ancient history, give in our contemporary bureaucratic scenario?
So you are asking what is the relevance of history for a bureaucrat? Okay. Okay, see, so in general you are asking this question. Okay, see, I will give you an example, and on the basis of that, I will try to make you understand what is the importance of history for any person's life. When you know that Britishers came to India, they colonized India, and we had to fight a very long battle to get independence. Okay, so when Britishers came to India, what did they say? When somebody comes, British came as a commercial entity and then they converted themselves into a political entity. So they came to India to do trade, and for doing trade they had permission from the British government, British Parliament. Okay. So what is the meaning of that? That means that British Parliament allowed one company to go to Asia and to conduct trade. That means that company was responsible to British Parliament as well. Okay. At the same time, when they came here as a commercial entity. When they started fighting wars and when they started collecting taxes, will people not question them? People in Britain, people in India, both of them will question them. What was the justification that they gave? They said, there is a very famous art historian, James Ferguson, who was a member of East India Company. He said that India is a country of philosophers and snake charmers. You people don't know how to rule. Why did he say that? Because till that point of time, we did not have any political treatise which was significant enough in terms of politics. What did Europe have? Europe had Machiavelli's The Prince. Okay, they started saying this. In 1905, we found a manuscript of Arthashastra. That is one of the biggest manuals written on politics in ancient times. Okay. Now, when we found the Arthashastra, what happened? In 1905, we found it. You will see that at the same time, Swadeshi movement is also taking place and it got intensified. So, this is there is one of the ideological reasons as well, because now you can counter them. So, you will see that the demand for Swaraj started taking place, because we can say that this is our history. And if you compare Arthashastra and The Prince, Arthashastra is much better and much bigger text. So we had a history of political treatises where what we could do, we could clearly say that, see, we knew how to rule even before you did. Okay. Then what happened? They started saying that you people did not have a cultural base. Why were they saying that? Because do you know what a freestanding statue is? Freestanding statue, if we make a statue which is freestanding, which does not need support, okay, that is a freestanding statue. So till that point of time, we had found a statue, freestanding statue, which was from Kushan period. Kushans are coming from Central Asia. Central Asia is related to the history of Europe culturally. So when they started saying it, we did not have anything to claim against this idea of theirs. In 1917, you will find that Didarganj Yakshi was discovered. I will tell you about how she was discovered when we will come to Mauryan period. Mauryans come before Kushanas, and that was a freestanding statue. What you could claim? that we knew the art of freestanding statue making before somebody from the outside came and started making it in India. Another ideological justification, why? Because you knew your history. Okay. Then what they started saying, okay, you had a political treatise, you were culturally well versed. What about civilizations? You were not civilized enough. So why? Because they had their Greco-Roman past. In India, we did not know of any such cultural past till then. In 1924, when Harappan civilization's discovery was announced publicly, they had no justification. And if you look at the pace of Indian national movement, that intensified further, which had no looking back. Okay, the idea of Purna Swaraj was being floated from that point onwards. Okay, so how can you see? First is the idea of self-confidence for any person. Why history is important? We know about our identity. If I say that I am this person, what is my strengths, what are my weaknesses, that is going to be determined by my cultural, my history of my community, history of my country, history of my culture. Okay, so to know yourself better, you need to know history. To know your strengths, you need to know history. To know your weaknesses, you need to know history. To address certain problems which are pertaining in our society, the problem of casteism, the problem of communalism, all of or the problem of women's subjugation, all these problems have its root in history. If you take specific example of the condition of women, why the condition of women started deteriorating? They were cut off from the financial role. Today, if you have to offer solution, what is the biggest solution you offer for the emancipation of women? That they need to be self-sufficient. How can you say that so confidently if you don't know why they were subjugated in the first place and how they were subjugated in the first place? So once you know the root of the problem, you will be able to offer solutions. If you know the history of particular communities, for example, when we talk about integration of tribals, there are certain cultural traits that are associated with them. We need to respect that. We need to know that if you are going to meddle with somebody's cultural traditions, there is going to be a backlash. How will you know that? You will know that because historically this has happened. So if you study history, it is going to enable you as a person, as a bureaucrat, to solve the problems of present times. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Is there any other question? Clear है चीजें? Okay. So now there are two things that I want to discuss with you before starting the syllabus. What are those things? First, what you should study in history when you are studying any period. What you should study and how do we know about them? These are two very important questions. So when you study history or any other times, there are certain aspects. If you focus upon that, you will be able to understand the period in a very comprehensive manner. What are those aspects? Economic, political, social, religious and culturals. Many of the times these two areas are intertwined. At many places these two areas are separate. Okay, these are the aspects. When you study economy, what do you study? Trade comes later. First, you will study agriculture. Okay. You will study agriculture. Okay. So when we study agriculture, what do we study in agriculture? उगा क्या रहे हैं पहले? Crops. So what kind of crops? Then will come the method. How will you produce something? So Technology. Technology. What kind of technology? How you are plowing the field. Are you using sticks? Are you using plows? If plows, what is the material of which it is made? Wood, iron or any other material? Are we taking assistance of animals or is it just human labor? That is technology. How are you irrigating your fields? Are you relying on the water that is coming from rains or are you constructing canals which are artificially constructed to provide irrigation? That also comes under technology. How you are plowing your field? Are you taking any assistance? And how you are irrigating your fields? These areas come under technology. Okay, so this is how you are going to study agriculture. When you are studying agriculture, this is the we talked about crop, we talked about technology. Who is producing it? Humans. Humans are producing it. Okay, when humans are producing it, who are those people? Farmers? Peasants? What kind of peasants? Do they have their own land? Are they working on somebody else's field? Can they keep the whole crop to themselves or do they have to pay something as taxes? Or if they are working as laborers, are they getting something in return or they are doing the labor for free? So the people, the third aspect that we study is the people who are producing the crops. Okay, and who are those people? What kind of relation do they share with the land and with the state? Okay, that is also another thing that you need to study here. Okay, so when we talk about the relation with states, that is tax. Okay, what kind of taxes are being levied? How much taxes? If there is a situation of natural disaster, are those taxes not being collected? Is the state a welfare state? Okay, these are the things that you should focus upon while studying agriculture. The second aspect that we study in economy is pastoralism. When we said assistance of animals, who are going to be those animals? What is the kind of food pattern that you are following? Were those people only eating crops they were producing or were they also relying on meat, milk that they were producing? So here comes pastoralism. Okay. Then we study craft production. What kind of crafts are being produced? That is something that we will study here. If crafts are being produced, what is the pattern of trade? Okay. What is the pattern of trade? Now, when you are doing trade, with whom are you doing trade? That is one thing. Village to village, village to city, empire to empire. That is the facet of trade that we need to understand. What else? When you are doing trade, of what goods? What are the goods in which you are trading? How are you trading it? Are you using money? Is there the presence of currency or not? That is another thing. Transportation. How are you transporting these things from one area to another? When you are using a particular road that is being constructed by one dynasty or that comes under the influence of a particular dynasty, do you have to pay taxes? If yes, what kind of taxes? What kind of relation do you share with the state as a trader? That is another thing that you need to study here. Okay, so these are the details that you need to study when you are talking about economy. ठीक है, अब हर पीरियड में जब हम पढ़ रहे हैं तो वी नीड टू लुक एट दीज डिटेल्स ओनली. Initially, you will have to read a bit. Once you have read that they are producing rice, they are producing wheat, they are producing pulses, they are producing millets, that is something that they are going to produce. इन लेटर टाइम्स एज वेल. मॉरियंस में कर रहे हैं तो पोस्ट मॉरियन में भी करेंगे. ये तो नहीं बोलेंगे कि अरे राजा चला गया दूसरा आ गया तो अब नहीं उगाएंगे, इस तरह की तो बात करेंगे. सो व्हाट विल यू नीड टू स्टडी इन लेटर टाइम्स? यस, in later times you need to you will have to study if there are additional changes, if there is one crop that is being introduced, or if those people are leaving something out. Okay, for example, potatoes. Potatoes are very important diet of our life. अभी आप देखेंगे भिंडी के साथ, गोभी के साथ, हर चीज के साथ आलू डाल के बनाते हैं. Was potato a part of our life in ancient times? No, it came in 16th century. Cabbage, not a part of our life in ancient times. So what are the crops that are being introduced at a particular point of time? Only that you will have to study. Otherwise you will already be knowing, okay, these are the crops, these are the animals, this is the cropping pattern, these are the people who are producing crops. Okay, so you need to work on it only once. After that, this is something that is going to be continued. Trade routes, that is going to be the same. The kind of crafts, कपड़े पहले बना रहे थे तो आज भी बनाएंगे. जो हमारी जरूरत है, that is going to be part of craft production. That is not going to change. Again, if there is something which is additional, there is something which is different, then you will have to study it. Otherwise, it's going to remain the same. Okay, so when you study history, try to study it in this way. Then it will become very easy for you to remember details about times. Okay, you will not have to mug things up. Coming to political area. हाँ जी. Can you please meet me after the class? I'll explain it because everybody else has already understood it. So it will be a waste of time for the class. Okay, we have to become a bit utilitarian here. Greater good. So where were we? Political. So when you are studying political detail, what do you need to study here? Polity. What kind of polity? What is the nature of polity? First thing, you will need to understand that nature of polity. Okay, nature of polity का क्या मायने है? Whether it's a oligarchical system, monarchical system, democratic system, republican system, that is the nature of the polity. Okay, that is nature. Then second thing, when you know the nature, what are the details? So in ancient you will find mostly the system has been monarchical. So in monarchical system you need to know about the details of specific kings and their contributions. UPSC has made it very clear for the last 10 years that they will ask you about the cultural contribution. So here you know what you have to focus upon. Kings and their cultural achievements. Okay. Then administration. When kings are ruling, even when it's a monarchical system, you need to know the larger administrative details, because somebody sitting in Pataliputra cannot control an area of Mysore, cannot control the area of Takshashila. Okay, so what is the larger administrative division through which kings are or queens are able to control their territory? That is something you will study in administration. And what relation do they share with different administrative officials? Okay, that is also one thing that we will study here. Society. What do we study in society? Whoever is present in the society, you will study them. Okay, so in India you will see there is Varna system. So we will study the details of Varna system. In each area, in each age, if there is any change that is coming. Okay, that is one thing that we will study. When we are talking about Varna system, we are prominently talking about the Arya setup. What about the non-Aryan population? That is another thing that we will study. Okay, and the social relation that existed between them. Another category is women. So what,
Position.
yes. So what has been the position of women throughout the historical development? Were they economically empowered or not? Were they contributing socially, culturally or not? If yes, what kind of contribution? Again, when we study women, we look at women in a homogeneous way. Women are also not a homogeneous category. They are a heterogeneous category because they are divided along the lines of caste, class, their education, so their religion. So we will study that which strata of women, if they are having economic resources, which strata of women had economic resources. When we are talking about control, which strata of women is being controlled more, and which strata of women had relative freedom. Okay, all these things you need to understand. Okay, हाँ हाँ, एजुकेशन इसमें ही आएगा, उनका एजुकेशन कैसा है वो चीज तो होगा ही. Okay, so that is something that will come here. Religion, what are the important religions? What are the important philosophies related with that religion? How they have influenced the larger structure of the society. That is something you will study in religion. Now culture, when we are talking about culture, so whatever cultures, whatever humans are producing is a part of culture. Language, prominent languages, the literature that was being composed in that language, the sculptures these people were making, the kind of architecture these people have made. Okay, हाँ, लैंग्वेज को जब लिख रहे हैं तो स्क्रिप्ट होगी ही, तो दैट इज there only. Okay, that is the implication. When we are talking about literature, we are obviously going to talk about the script. Okay, so architecture, dance, music, painting, all these things you have to look at in a historical perspective. Again, when we study ancient, we will do some parts of art and culture simultaneously. So keep two separate books and keep writing what is part of art and culture, so that it will help you in means. अब आप हड़प्पा पढ़ रहे हैं तो हड़प्पा के लोग जो बना रहे हैं वो भी तो कल्चर है ना, उनको हड़प्पा की पॉलिटी और सोसाइटी से अलग थोड़ी कर देंगे. मॉरियंस पढ़ रहे हैं, जो कल्चरल ट्रेट्स में आप लोगों से अलग तो नहीं कर देंगे, वो तो वहीं रहेगा. तो you have to study it in integrated manner and then you have to understand what is important from examination perspective. क्योंकि वो लोग ये तो नहीं कहेंगे कि 3000 साल बाद 4000 साल बाद कोई एग्जाम होगा तो हम उस हिसाब से अपना कल्चर अलग रख देते हैं, सोसाइटी अलग रख देते हैं. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पर हमको ये चीज करना है. देयर आर सम टॉपिक्स विच आर सेपरेट इन आर्ट एंड कल्चर, बट देयर आर सम टॉपिक्स विच आर इंटीग्रेटेड with ancient history, with medieval history. So try to keep a separate notebook as well, because that will be easier for you to revise when exam will come. Okay, so this is how we'll cover it. Now we generally have a break at 10:30. Today we'll take a break now. Why? Because we have to start with sources and I want to do it in a comprehensive manner together. So that's why I'll stop here and in half an hour we'll meet and then we'll start sources and we'll try to finish it today and start lithic age. Okay, so see you in half an hour. आप लोगों ने लिख लिया ये?